In the tumultuous currents of American history, the Cherokee people emerged as stalwart guardians of their ancient homeland, facing a relentless barrages that tested the very essence of their existence. Welcome to our journey through the rich tapestry of Cherokee culture, a story of resilience, struggle, and enduring traditions. Today, we delve into the heart of the Cherokee tribe, a people whose history is woven deeply into the fabric of America. Before we continue, please subscribe our channel to watch more history videos about Native American tribes. The Cherokee are an indigenous people of North America who are descendants of the Iroquoians. There are several ideas concerning the origins of the name Cherokee. It might have originated with the Choctaw, one of the tribes in the region, or one of the Iroquois' 5 nation tribes. The name is also believed to be derived from a Creek word that means people of different languages. The Cherokee initially called themselves Anian Weir, which meant principal people. They speak Cherokee and have their own language writing system developed in the 19th century by a famous and influential Cherokee leader named Sequoyah. Ancestors' journey. Anthropologists and historians have two main theories about the origins of the Cherokee. One possibility is that the Cherokee arrived quite late in the southern Appalachians, migrating from northern regions around the Great Lakes in late prehistoric times. This was the traditional territory of the Cherokee Nation and other Iroquois-speaking peoples. Other evidence suggests that the Cherokee migrated to the Great Lakes region from what is now northern Texas or Mexico in prehistoric times. They later migrated to the mountains and valleys of the southern Appalachians. An ethnographer named James Mooney, who lived with the tribe in the late 19th century, recorded discussions with elders who recounted the oral traditions of the Cherokee, who migrated south from the Great Lakes region in ancient times. By 1500 BC, a separate Cherokee language had created, and by 1000 BC, the Cherokee led a forestland lifestyle with distinct cultural characteristics influenced by the Mississippian tradition. Civilization. The Cherokee economy, like that of other tribes in the southeast, was based primarily on agriculture, growing corn, beans, squash, sunflowers, and tobacco. Deer, bear, and elk were hunted with bows and arrows. Small game animals such as raccoons, rabbits, squirrels, and turkeys were hunted using long-handled blowguns that fired wooden or feather arrows. For fishing, hooks and lines, spears and traps were used. Wild plant foods such as roots, vegetables, berries, and nuts were also collected as additional food sources. Clothes varied depending on the season, but were mainly made of woven fabric or deerskin. Women wore dresses, men wore pants, and everyone wore shoes. In winter, cloaks made of fabric or fur were worn. Hairstyles vary greatly from clan to clan. Some men were clean-shaven, some had beards, some had shaved heads, and some wore top knots or ponytails. At the time of European contact, the Cherokee were a well-established farming people who lived in about 200 large villages and towns. A typical Cherokee town consisted of 30 to 60 homes and a large meeting hall where general meetings were held and the sacred fire burned. Houses were usually made of larches, circular structures made of interwoven branches, like upside-down baskets, and plastered with clay. The entire structure was partially sunken into ground. Later, they were transformed into windy cabins with bark roofs, doors, and smoke holes in the roof. An important religious holiday was the Busk or Green Corn Festival, which celebrated first fruits and new fire celebration. The Cherokee were a matrilineal society. In early times, they were divided into 7 matrilineal tribes and lived in numerous settled villages, usually located along rivers and streams. Mostly, women were primarily heads of families, households of homes and land, farmers of the family land, and mothers of the land. Like many Native American cultures, Cherokee women were revered as life givers and nurturers of life via childbirth and the growing of plants, Women were traditionally community leaders in Cherokee communities. The ancient Cherokees lived in a substituting state of war and peace, which called for a dual organization of tribal government, a white or peace organization, and a red or war organization. Each town was administered by its two head chiefs, the white chief in peacetime and the red chief in war. A gathering of dominant ladies was present at each war council. These women served as counselors to the male leaders, additionally regulated the treatment of prisoners of war. Subjugation was a component of Cherokee society earlier to European colonization, as they habitually subjugated enemy captives taken during times of conflict with other native tribes. By their verbal tradition, the Cherokee viewed slavery as the result of an individual's failure in fighting and as a temporary status pending discharge or the slave's adoption into the tribe. During the colonial time, Carolinian settlers purchased Cherokee slaves during the late 17th and early 18th century. They were also among the Native American people who sold local slaves to traders for utilized as laborers in Virginia and further north. As the Cherokee started to receive a few European American traditions, they started to buy enslaved African Americans to serve as laborers on their farms or plantations. When the Cherokee were forcibly removed on the Trail of Tears, they took slaves with them and continued the trade in Indian region. Hernando de Soto and his men, Spanish explorers, led an expedition that's believed to have made the first European contact in 1540 with the Cherokees when they met on the Tennessee River. De Soto didn't spend much time with them, but he was hostile toward other indigenous people. Although Juan Pato expedition revisited the region in 1566, and the Spanish made a fort and a little mining and smelting operation in the region until 1690. Cherokee's area in the interior mountains kept them relatively disconnected until after the settlement of Virginia. In 1609, by 1629, English traders had worked their way west into the Appalachians and met the Cherokees. Their population in the 17th century was about 20,000 to 50,000. In 1673, English settlers came to Echota, the capital of the Cherokee Nation, to set up trade relations. For European goods, such as brass pots, textiles, scissors, knives, guns and ammunition, metal axes and hoes, and trinkets were traded for local deer skins, beeswax, river cane baskets, and native slaves. Important changes started to happen inside the Cherokee society. As a result, they moved from medication man to warrior, and warriors became seekers for profit. Cherokee relations with their neighbors were not always friendly. They raided Spanish settlements in Florida during 1673 and battled the coastal tribes of the Carolinas, but European trade and competition disturbed these rivalries and destabilized the local people. By 1680, most of the tribes had gotten their first firearms, and the Cherokee had fortified their larger villages. Constant conflict with the Catawba tribe erupted in the east, followed by a growing friction with the Creek and Choctaw to the south. To the west, there was a traditional hostility with the Chickasaw, also a British ally. To the north, the struggle between the French, Dutch, and English in the fur trade started the Beaver Wars. In 1730, the Cherokees made a union with the English by pledging their allegiance to the British Crown, King George II, and promising to trade only with the English. Other European powers were making unions with other Native American tribes as well, so the English required special protection from their greatest rival, the French. A wave of smallpox epidemics in the 18th century cut the Cherokees' population in half. Diseases carried by the Europeans were a big issue for Native American people, cutting greatly their numbers at the time. By that time, Cherokee territory had been firmly established in the Appalachian region of the southeastern United States, including territory that included parts of modern North and South Carolina, Tennessee, Kentucky, Alabama, and Georgia. However, through negotiations in 10 different treaties between 1721 and 1777 with Great Britain, large sections of land were given up by the Cherokee, dramatically reducing their regional holdings. Relations with United States. United States. From the earliest days of American independence, relations with Native American tribes had been a primary concern for national security. Two of the most efficient people in forming the Indian policy by the new United States government were Henry Knox, Secretary of War, as well as President George Washington. President Washington accepted civilizing or acclimatizing the tribes to European standards would give the most excellent way to enduring peace. Their view of civilization meant that Native Americans would become agriculturists, giving up hunting, the vast lands needed to keep up the migratory lifestyle and developing permanent villages. They believed that natives should become Christians, learn to speak English, and adopt European family lifestyle. The Cherokees were assimilated with the help of Christian missionaries. Reading, writing, math, housekeeping, personal hygiene, table manners, and other etiquettes were imparted by missionaries. They forbade them from engaging in any heathen activities. Conversely, the Cherokee people rejected ideas that didn't seem useful and accepted those that they thought would be beneficial. It soon became clear that the new American settlers were no more willing to stop their territorial development than the English settlers before them. Deep and long-lasting disputes occurred between Cherokee leadership and among tribal members. When it came to responding to the new settlers' continued efforts, some advocated for discussion and integration, while others opposed diplomacy at every opportunity. In the early 18th century, a Cherokee man named Sequoyah assisted his people in preserving their language and cultural traditions while remaining unified during the arrival of modern American society into their region. Working over a 12-year span, Sequoyah made a syllabary, a set of written symbols to speak to each syllable in the spoken Cherokee language. This made it possible for the Cherokee to achieve mass literacy in a short period of time and various tribes to communicate wherever they are. By the early 1800s, the continual loss of Cherokee land caused many to relocate to reserved and temporarily undisputed lands to further west. By the end of the 1800th century, the Cherokee tribes living east of the Mississippi formed a centralized government. Affairs were no longer executed at the clan level. Around 1/3 of the Cherokee people moved to Indian Territory west of the Mississippi River. Around the year 1817, they signed a treaty with the United States that traded land in the southeastern United States for land in modern-day Arkansas. In 1828, Sequoyah went with a delegation of West Cherokees to Washington, D.C. to sign a new treaty exchanging land in Arkansas for land in modern-day Oklahoma, also known as Indian Territory, earning the name Old Settlers, because they were the first of the tribe to settle Indian Territory in the West. The Cherokees made significant efforts to demonstrate to the United States that they had assimilated. They established New Echota, a modern capital, and created their own constitution and the first Native American newspaper. However, this did not ease the pressure put on the Cherokees to move west onto designated Indian Territory. The discovery of gold in Cherokee territory brought these tensions to a head. Finally, in May 1830, President Jackson satisfied Congress to pass his Indian Removal Act, which called for the removal of all eastern native tribes to a territory west of the Mississippi. More of the 5 civilized tribes, the Chickasaw, Choctaw, Creek, and Seminole, signed removal treaties in 1832. The Trail of Tears. The Cherokees rejected the demands of President Jackson and led their case to the Supreme Court. Several American lawyers helped Chief John Ross fight for his people in the Cherokee Nation versus Georgia case. Meanwhile, settlers continued to move and live in Cherokee territory, even if that was against the law. In 1834, much of the land Cherokee still claimed in Georgia was auctioned off in a land lottery. Despite Chief John Ross' objections, a small group of Cherokees, later known as the Treaty Party, met to formally accept the Treaty of New Echota, in which remaining Cherokee land was sold for territory in the West for $5 million, along with some provision and supplies for the journey west and a year's worth of federal support for those who moved. The U.S. Senate ratified the treaty and President Jackson immediately signed it, giving the Cherokee until May 1838 to leave. As a result, almost 16,000 Cherokee, along with other natives, were forcibly moved from their eastern homeland. Although some of them stayed, hiding in the mountains, in June 1838, Cherokees were loaded on flat boats at Ross Landing, Georgia, and sailed down the Tennessee River. The boats were described as being so crammed that they nearly sank. Some rode the train, while others traveled on foot. Over 4,000 died on the long path to Oklahoma Territory. Under the removal, Chief Ross and his supporters in the National Party encountered another problem: the formation of a new, combined Cherokee government in the West. The Eastern Cherokees had a constitution based on traditional Cherokee laws, but old settlers created a system based on the United States. In July 1838, Sequoyah and Jesse Bushyhead, an Eastern Cherokee Baptist minister, suggested a meeting to determine the preferred form of government. Before the meeting, a group of Cherokees from the National Party plotted to take revenge on those responsible for signing the Treaty of New Echota and the Trail of Tears. 3 men were killed simultaneously: Major Ridge, Elias Boudneau, and John Ridge. In July 1839, John Ross, the National Party, and a few representatives of the old settlers signed an Act of Union. In September, a constitution similar to the one created in the East was accepted, with John Ross elected as principal chief and an old settler as second principal chief. For the next several years, the Cherokee Nation underwent a series of internal conflicts, sometimes violent, leading to civil war, as the old settlers, the Treaty Party, and the National Party adjusted to life in the West. Sequoyah worked with John Ross to try to bring peace between the factions. The war came to an end on August 6, 1846, when representatives from each faction signed a treaty arranged by the U.S. government. The treaty promised that all Cherokee Nation members would have access to the lands they had been granted and offered a general amnesty for crimes against the nation or individuals. During the American Civil War, the tribe supported the Confederacy following a major internal conflict. The Cherokees in western North Carolina were members of Thomas Legion, a unit of around 1,100 soldiers of Cherokee and white origin who fought primarily in Virginia, where they had a remarkable war record. Thomas Legion was the last Confederate force to surrender in North Carolina at Waynesville on May 9, 1865. After the Civil War, the United States freed the black slaves belonging to native tribes in Indian Territory, and many Cherokees gave their money to William Holland Thomas, their agent and first white chief, to purchase land. Thomas acquired the tracts that form the modern-day Qualla boundary, the Cherokee Indian Reservation in North Carolina. These Cherokees, along with hundreds who had hidden in the mountains or legally owned land through the Treaty of 1817, formed the Eastern Cherokee Band. Under the General Allotment Act of 1887, tribal land was forcibly allotted to individual members. In 1891, the tribe's western land expansion, the Cherokee Strip or Cherokee Outlet, was sold to the United States, which was opened mostly to non-native settlers in 1893. The Cherokee government was dissolved in 1907, and its people became U.S. citizens when Oklahoma gained statehood. They lost their right to elect their own chiefs until 1970, when they regained it through a congressional act signed by President Nixon. In 1918, British forces attacked German positions in northwest France during World War I, known as the Somme Offensive. Cherokee code talkers were the first Native Americans in the American military to transmit messages under fire. After World War II, Cherokees fought actively in Europe and the Pacific, serving as code talkers again. During the Civil Rights Movement, they fought for Native and African American rights and regained the right to elect their own government. Today, 3 Cherokee tribes are federally recognized: the United Kituwa Band of Cherokee Indians in Oklahoma, the Cherokee Nation in Oklahoma, and the Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in North Carolina. In 2000, over 281,000 people identified as Cherokee, with an additional 448,000 claiming to be part Cherokee. Today, between 12,000 to 22,000 people speak Cherokee. Thanks for watching. If you like this video, then please share and give your feedback. Thank you.